Nice dogs. Exactly. That is
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Positively Connected in Dogs. Today, I'm joined by a special friend and colleague, Susanne Shelton of Clickety Split Dog Training, and she is also a breeder of Austerlitz German Shepherds. So, Susanne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so give our audience a little bit of a preview, your experience in dogs and dog training, and of course, your experience on our topic today, which is successfully raising littermates.
Sure. So I've been training dogs and competing with dogs since the 90s. And we've been breeders, me and my husband, of German Shepherds since the 90s as well. Mainly sport dogs, but in the last 10 years or so, we've really moved out into training of companion dogs. So as far as siblings go, it's really common in the breeding world to hold back, as we call it, siblings from a litter and raise them, or as breeders would say, grow them out and see if they're going to be something we can add to our breeding programs later, because that's not something you're going to know right away. So it's sort of enculturated in the breeding community how to do that. And we started, I think the first set of litter mates that I had kept back was actually Frisco and Fina, which were from my first F litter. And that would have been probably about 20, maybe 24 years ago. And then we had multiple since then. People that follow my program will recognize them. We had from our H litter, we had Helga and Hasso, or as we called them, Spike and Blackie. And then later we had Pyro and Pippin that were relatively well-known siblings that we held back. Ivy and Alona. We have Diva and Zelda. So it's multiples at this particular point in the game.
Yeah.
So that sort, and we never considered it to be unusual. It's common in the dog show and the dog world culture.
Yeah.
It wasn't until we got working with litter with companion dogs that we realized that this was something controversial. And then probably in the last, I don't know, maybe year, I'd be interested to know what you think, year or two, this has become moved beyond controversial and into the realm of being, a hot topic that people just literally freak out about.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how we got into dealing with raising siblings formally.
Yeah, I think I agree with you absolutely that within the last couple of years, it seems like everybody has a very strong opinion about it. And raising puppies is hard. It's a lot of hard work. So raising two definitely presents a lot of challenges.
Yes.
One thing that comes up quite a bit when we're talking about littermates is this idea of littermate syndrome. And we've included a link here for people to read a little bit more about it and about some of the science behind it, because there really isn't anything definitive that says that this exists and that raising littermates can't be successful. So certainly it's going to be hard and it's going to present some challenges that we're going to talk about today. But I think it is important for people to know that it can be done and it can be done well. There's no reason that bringing two dogs up of around the same age, has to present any problems.
And I think that the label that we've assigned to it of syndrome, to the lay person and even to some professionals, when they hear that, they think this is a real thing.
Yeah.
That this is a evidence-based syndrome that's unavoidable.
Yeah.
And when in reality, which I think Kayla detailed so well in her article that we're going to put in the notes for today, that this is really a wide constellation of behaviors, most of which are not necessarily unique to siblings, that get superstitiously associated with the fact that the dogs that are exhibiting these behaviors are siblings.
Yeah.
And I think that's where things have gone off the rails. Is this labeling of it like it's a real like gravity.
Yeah. I'm big on no labels, because I think ultimately what it ends up doing is it harms our relationship with our dogs, and
Right.
it prevents us from actually just being observant about behaviors, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that we need to kind of remove that label ourselves as well as professionals, as dog owners, and really just treat each animal as an individual and figure out what each puppy needs. And I think that that can be a challenge for people raising two dogs as well, because even if the dogs aren't the same age or aren't the same breed, we go, well, you know, I did it this way with my other dog, or, you know, well, my other dog was so much easier to do this with. And it's so easy for us to compare the two dogs. So let's
Right.
talk a little bit about that, about treating each puppy as an individual. When you're raising litter mates, how do you go about making sure that you're very observant about each puppy and giving them specifically what they need?
I think this is really a core concept with puppy raising. And this is one of the biggest challenges for the average puppy raiser, because
Mhm.
most people in their lifetime are not going to raise very many puppies. This is where we have demographics like breeders who actually do have an advantage, and a lot of our show and sport competitors as well, because they also have to grow out
Mhm.
prospects and they have more experience. And I think in the dog world in general, we don't give enough credit to experience. So whenever we have a new puppy, one puppy, two puppies, or we're adding a puppy to a home with dogs in it, we have to observe each individual animal and see how they're responding to all the various interventions that we're doing of all the different types.
Yeah.
And with siblings, what can be often a challenge that's unique to siblings is sometimes they look the same. And if we're not, and yet we can't necessarily leave collars on puppies unattended. That's dangerous. So we have to be able to actually tell which puppy we're looking at in a particular moment. So I
Mhm.
think identification of puppies, if you have puppies, if you have two black lab puppies, then you're going to have a bigger challenge than if you have a black and a sable German Shepherd that you can tell apart in an instant
Yeah.
and know, oh, one of these puppies looks worried, but the other one doesn't.
Mhm.
And I think we always have to consider that the way we've done things before may not be applicable to do this time.
Yeah.
For one, things change. We get better at things in the dog world as we
Mhm.
come along. And so, if I raised a puppy 15 years ago, I may be doing things fundamentally different
Yeah.
now. So it's a little bit of a learning curve for everybody every time they raise a new puppy.
Yeah. I think that one thing that happens quite a bit when we bring a new dog into the household, or even bring two puppies into the household, is the fact that they're the same species, and it's
Mm-hmm.
often easy for them to communicate with each other. It's often easy for them to play with one another and tire one another out. So we can start to see, you know, the dogs bonding to each other a bit quicker than they'll bond to us. So how do you balance, when you're raising litter mates at home, the concept of allowing them to have that social time, but also making sure that they're each building a relationship with you individually?
I think this is super important. This is super important with housing multiple dogs in general. And
Mhm.
it's extremely important if you're raising two puppies that are very similar in age. And not only is it easier for dogs to interact and bond with each other than with us for obvious reasons, they're dogs, they're social.
Mhm.
Of course, they're going to do that. Is that puppies are at the same developmental stage.
Mhm.
So when you have a puppy and an adult, you have a puppy who's inappropriately playing, and you have an adult that either needs to be protected from that because they're not tolerant to it, they're not a skilled nanny, or you
Mhm.
have, if you're blessed enough that you have a nanny, then you have a nanny that is going to be helping your puppy learn appropriate social skills. And that is going to require monitoring and intervention because we don't want to leave adult dogs to the with puppies to the point that they feel defensive.
Right.
When two puppies are together, what happens is they both have the same deficits in their behavioral understanding of what's appropriate and inappropriate. So they tend to play really great until they don't.
Mhm.
And then they start to quarrel because
Yeah.
they don't know. They don't know all of the things they need to know yet. And they don't have the actual mental maturity to do a lot of those things. So we have to, I would say we have to be aware of what they're doing when they're together, especially when they're playing,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure that we are intervening in that regularly, that we're
Yep.
not leaving puppies to play together so much that not only are they hyper bonding to each other and having most of their pleasant interactions with each other and most of their needs met by each other, but they're also kind of getting some bad experiences with each other too.
Right.
And maybe they're even learning that the way you get relief from your sibling is by using aggression,
Right.
and that aggression is the go-to. This is how you stop something from happening to you. Because then when we hit adolescence and
Yeah.
their general tolerance goes down and they begin to interact with each other more as adolescents than as infants, we start to see escalations in those behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And that occurs regardless of if they're litter mates together or if it's one puppy with an adult dog or whatever. But it's really bigger. It's bigger
Yeah.
when it's siblings. Again, because you have two dogs that share the same weaknesses at the same moment,
Mm-hmm.
the same immaturity, the same impulsiveness, the same short temper, which is what starts to come in adolescence.
Yep.
Those sync up perfectly. So our obligation is we have to curate what the dogs are learning around each other. And
Mm-hmm.
that takes mindfulness and
Yeah.
it takes separation. And then to facilitate primarily bonding with us and remaining responsive to us, we have an obligation to make darn sure that the relationships and the interactions they're having with us
Mm-hmm.
are good, that we're not the roadblock to fun.
Yep.
From the puppy's point of view, right? That we're not the impediment to enjoying things, that we're not a drag in their life, that they're not, oh, great, mom's coming. We're going to get thrown in a crate now and not get to play anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That poisons the relationship and things become out of balance, and it can be hard to pull that back. So we need to make sure that each individual puppy is having a wide variety of extremely positive interactions with us every day without their
Yeah.
sibling and with their sibling.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be mindful to reinforce puppies in ways that are meaningful to them, which goes to that observational subject we were talking about earlier. What's reinforcing, what's rewarding to my puppy in this moment?
Yep.
So that we can find moments when the puppies are choosing to look at us.
Yeah.
And we can come in and really reinforce them for disregarding the other puppy for a little bit and interacting with us. This is
Mm-hmm.
the same learning we would do when we took a single puppy to puppy class.
Yep.
Right? It's not that anything we do as siblings is radically different. It's just applied at a different time, and it takes a level of discipline
Mm-hmm.
that has to be cultivated by the owners, by the families.
Yeah.
Um, and the irony of this, of course, is that some people get siblings because they think it will be less work.
Right.
And the puppies will raise each other and keep each other company and play with each other. And there is truth to that. The puppies do those things.
Yeah.
But there is not truth to the idea that it's less work.
Yeah.
It's like saying you're going to get a puppy and have when you have school age children, and that's going to be less work because the kids are going to keep the puppy busy.
Yeah. Not.
It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
It's so much more work. Now the puppy's biting the children. The children are afraid of the puppy. And
Yep.
you've let the Lord of the Flies happen, and surprise, surprise. Now parents have to step in and resolve things. So
Yeah.
I think it's super duper important that each dog, I would, so many of things that we talk about with siblings, Chelsea, apply to any multiple dog environment.
Absolutely.
Each individual dog needs to have a very strong bond. And what I mean by bond is a reinforcement history, a long history of really positive interactions with their caregivers, and a good set of skills. They don't have to be obedience trial champions to have good skill sets.
Yeah.
But some skills, definitely those things are important when you live with any dogs in a multi-dog environment.
Yeah.
And it's especially true with siblings because, again, they share all these same challenges and problems and weaknesses that stem from the fact that they're babies.
Yeah.
Right? They don't know things yet.
Yep. Yeah. I think one of the biggest keys to success when I'm working with clients that are raising litter mates is the at-home setup, creating something that really works for you, for your puppies, for your home environment, and kind of planning on that being a, focal point of the house. I know everybody now has a lot of open floor plans and we don't want to mess it up by putting all these X pens in, but I find that even more essential when we are dealing with two puppies to have a setup where you can easily rotate the puppies to spend time with them individually, having crates in different areas. So talk to us a little bit before we get into the skills that are helpful. Talk to us a little bit about some at-home setup features that you find really help the families that are raising litter mates thrive with.
It's super important. And I think what happens a lot of times with litter mates is people get one setup. So they bring their puppies home and they put them in the same crate at night. And they have them in the same playpen. And, I think that's fantastic during transition week when we are separating puppies from the litter, especially for puppies that are being separated a little bit prematurely, maybe while their following instinct is at its peak, which is between 6 and 9 weeks. Puppies have an incredibly strong instinct to stay together, to stay with their dam or in the vicinity of their dam, in the vicinity of familiar things, right? Because they're exceedingly vulnerable to predation if they aren't pets, which they haven't been.
Yeah.
For the majority of their evolutionary history, they have not been. They have not been pets in the sense that we keep them now. And so there's a strong survival advantage to puppies that stay together and stay close to their home environment, wherever the female has chosen to have her puppies. For dogs, that's usually some sheltered place around humans somewhere. And so when we pluck a puppy out during those really early days, between, I would say, 6 and 9 weeks, we can anticipate that we're going to have a very strong separation stress response from the puppy.
Yeah.
How pronounced that's going to be depends on where the puppy falls on the age range. There's a huge difference between 6 and 8 weeks, and a big difference between 8 and 9 weeks. Between 8 and 9 weeks, a lot of breeds, in my breed, for example, the puppies are actually getting a little tired of each other. They're not quite. They're much more interested. If I let them out into the yard at 8 weeks, they go together in a little clump for a while, and then at 9 weeks, they all run out and they diffuse immediately. They just go wherever. Like, you'll lose them at that age if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So that's during transition week. It's fine. Like, let them be together. You have 6-week-old puppies. I wouldn't even bother setting up separate areas until they're 8 weeks.
Yeah.
If you bring home a 10-week-old puppy, maybe let them sleep together in the crate in your bedroom for 3 nights. And then, by golly, they're old enough. They need to start being separated from each other.
Yeah.
And so we need, for nighttime sleeping areas, I think for most puppies, the typical scenario is they're sleeping in a bedroom. And, we can have 2 separate sleeping crates. And those can be right next to each other at first. And once the puppies have settled in and they're not fussing at night anymore, and they're sleeping soundly and getting the necessary rest that they need at night, we can start separating those crates. So 6 inches a night is plenty.
Yeah.
So after, a week or 2 in the home, you can have a crate on one side of the bed and the other crate on the other side of the bed. So now the puppies have very gradually been separated from each other, and we've halted that separation if we see distress. Wait for them to habituate and get used to that level of separation, and then we go right back at it. We can't say, well, they're sad when they're separated, so we just stop separating them. No. You have to just, yes, you have to be sensitive to distress. We don't want to stress puppies, but we have to gently plug along, when we get going. Same with the living space. I think we need 2 playpens, one for each puppy with its own bed and its own litter box if you're doing a litter box and all of those things. And again, we can start those very close together, so the puppies can lay literally right next to each other and have that comfort at first. But then we want to start gradually spacing them apart, especially if we're seeing tension between the puppies over resources. So you give them both a chew, let's say, in their playpen, and you notice that one is hovering and clenching it, right? And in some breeds, we know this is going to be a bigger problem going forward. And so we have to be proactive and try to get some degree of separation from them. And so those sort of setup things are super duper important, and they're integral, I think, to being able to condition the puppies that it is very normal to be confined while their sibling is out. This is a big goal that needs to happen in the first probably 4 to 6 months, depending on when the puppy, what age it is when it comes into your home. Is it a slow maturing or a fast maturing breed? Those sort of things. We need to do that and be very diligent about that work, because we cannot promise our dogs that they will always be together. And it's an unkindness to raise them such that they have the expectation that they'll never be separated, or it's just, it doesn't work. And we know with multiple dog homes, there's always the risk that we're going to see aggression between housemate dogs. Doesn't matter if they're siblings or not. It's a potential problem. And if this happens, we have to create separation between the dogs, sometimes and often permanently, so that both dogs can feel safe in their home. No animal or human should have to live in a home with someone that they think is going to beat them up. So we, at the very least, if dogs are intolerant towards each other, they need to be separated for their own mental well-being. And at the most, we may have to rehome one. And if people think that hyper bonded dogs are always friendly with each other, but hyper bonded dogs are the most often going to be exhibiting some aggression towards each other. That's been my experience anyway.
I think that a lot of times people that are raising puppies can get so fixated on, I have to crate train my puppy has to be in the crate, that sometimes we miss that fine line between getting a puppy comfortable with a crate and crate training them. And oftentimes we'll see puppies, just let them cry it out, where puppies are building a history of stress and fear and concern with that crate. So I love, especially when we're bringing puppies home at such a young age, where they're used to being with one another, they're undergoing all of these environmental changes and stressors, being separated, from the rest of the group, to then allow them a little bit of time to adjust to that new environment before you start separating them. And I think that that's so important, because we don't want to just put them in a crate and let them cry it out. The goal is for them to get a history of positive associations with that space. And if that means that they hang out next to each other for a few days, that's only going to set you up for success in terms of getting those crates further apart, because they're learning comfort and quiet and relaxation in those spaces instead of panic.
And that they're safe. This is a safe, and some puppies come into a new home and they walk in the front door and they feel safe. They just do, because they're just very resilient puppies. And then, and they've had experiences that have set them up to handle this transition. Other puppies don't. Maybe they've had actual trauma already in their lives. Maybe they've had nothing to prepare them for any of this.
Yeah.
And they come in, or they had the misfortune of inheriting a pessimistic genetic heritage, right? Where they're just
Yeah.
worried about everything is going to kill them. There's no reason not to use the comfort of the sibling to your advantage during those transitions. And just like we would use a mentor dog to help a fearful puppy see that nothing is to be afraid of here. Look,
Yeah.
my mentor is completely comfortable and happy. And that's a very powerful signal to puppies.
Mm-hmm.
The reverse side of that, of course, is if you get one fearful puppy, or you bring a puppy into a home with a fearful dog,
Mm-hmm.
they'll imprint on that too. So I think one of the biggest and best concepts that has really been embraced and is continuing to be explored in the positive training community passionately is the idea of doing things gradually and incrementally.
Mm-hmm.
And, we do this in how we teach skills.
Yeah.
And we do this in how we raise criteria. And we can apply those same principles to things that we do with our puppies. We don't have to do a separation all at once on a day
Mm-hmm.
and say, you know what, these puppies have been together for 8 weeks and 2 weeks in my home. And oh my gosh, I just read a blog on littermate syndrome and I've been crating them together and this is horrible. So now I'm going to separate them into separate crates where
Mm-hmm.
they cannot see or hear each other. And I'm just going to do it today. I think there's so much benefit in doing things incrementally.
Yeah.
And asking ourselves, what's the tiniest step I could take here? What's the smallest thing? Well, I could crate the puppies in this location together for 3 or 4 days until they're sleeping and they're eating well during the day and they're curious about their environment. And all these little observations tell me the puppies are feeling pretty good about this. They are having a good time in this new environment. So now maybe I move that crate over and I put a second crate next to it. And then I put them together in that crate for one night. And then the next night I put them right next to me. How can we explain things to the puppies
Yeah.
in a really slow way so that they feel safe? And what
Mm-hmm.
happens when we do this is we build resilience.
Yeah.
We too often think that what builds resilience is bad things happening to you. It's the whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, whatever doesn't make you stronger kills you. And things that are trying to kill you are trying to kill you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nonsense. I don't know if this is an American thing or what. This idea that the way you teach strength is
Yeah.
by making things unpleasant and horrible. I
And
think
having them learn how to just deal with it, and
just
they'll
deal
toughen
with
up.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's very effective. And I think the risk that we run is tremendous. We
Yeah.
run so many risks that people don't understand. So when we can do things incrementally and we present challenges to puppies in small, measurable chunks that they
Mm-hmm.
can chew and swallow, they don't choke.
Yeah.
Right? They become stronger. They feel more confident because, oh, this happened and it was weird and it was kind of unpleasant, but it was all right.
Mm-hmm.
Things happen. It's all right. It's normal. And I think we get this sort of so what response that they talk about in puppy culture a lot when we present challenges to puppies as a stress and not as a distressing occurrence.
Right.
So it's with siblings, this is really important. We need to separate them. And this is going to have inherent to it some stress.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times positive reinforcement trainers get accused of wanting to bubble wrap our animals so they never experience stress. And I don't think that's accurate. It's not that we don't want littermates to experience the stress of separation from each other. It's that we want to present it to them as a stress and not as a distressing occurrence.
Right.
And it needs to be metered out in small bites that the puppy can chew and digest and move forward. Not a huge bite. So these
Yeah.
setups are what is going to enable us to do that.
Yep.
is having the there.
Yeah.
Schedule.
Yeah. And a schedule. Yeah, absolutely. I always like to tell people to think about that big picture. Like what is that goal? Well, it's for them to be comfortable, quiet, relaxed. They can sleep, they can chill in a crate out of sight from one another.
Right.
And then you want to split it into as many little pieces so that every single day or every couple days it changes so little that the puppies barely notice it.
Exactly.
So that they're slowly getting into that versus that big change happening overnight. And I think that can be hard for some people, but sometimes, thinking of that big picture and just observing those puppies daily to figure out how are they doing with this? Are they comfortable? Are they quiet? Well, if they are, then it means they're probably handling the situation okay. And it's all right for us to make just a little bit of a change.
Right. It's such a good point, Chelsea, because I think this highlights a couple challenges and a couple really good reasons for people to reach out to the appropriate professional.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think one of the biggest challenges that you face when you're a novice is it's not readily obvious how you're going to break these things down.
Yeah.
It's not that people do too much because they have a mean intent. They don't.
Right.
They do too much because to them, that's the next logical thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about a skilled professional, and we have to add that because we know that bless dog trainers' hearts, we're just not all the same.
Yep.
And we know that dog trainers in particular, I think, have professional dog trainers in particular on social media have really thrown a lot of gasoline on the fear mongering around raising siblings. I've had people contact me for help with their siblings that have told them that they've contacted 3 different professionals for help. And each one simply told them, you have to get rid of one of these dogs or I won't help you.
Oh my gosh.
And it's
That's awful.
It terrifies people.
Yeah.
They're being led to believe that these dogs are going to kill each other and probably kill them. And then probably, I don't know, go on a rampage through downtown and Godzilla all over the entire city. So there's that kind of fear mongering. Then there's the idea that we have dogs that are in homes that are motivated and are good and are trying to be good. And as a profession, we're giving people advice to give those animals up.
Yeah.
I have a fundamental problem with that. I think our goal as trainers should be to keep dogs in homes when that is possible and in everybody's best interest. And if you haven't worked with a client, how do you know if it's possible?
Yeah.
You're just telling them right off the bat, you're a horrible person for doing this. These dogs are going to end up killing each other and you've got to get rid of one. So if you go to the appropriate professional, somebody who is skilled and is trained, that will help you, they can help you find these slices.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we teach people how to do this, then it becomes very easy for them with the next skill.
Right.
Next skill. It's a concept that once you get it, it becomes much easier to apply it in the future. But I think it's a relatively new concept, especially in the manners training world, where very often the manners training world has sort of been the stepchild of obedience, competition. So we're using a lot of training that is really intended for competition obedience dogs. That's then just sort of being applied to pet dogs because we don't really know what else to do with them.
Yeah.
And that's not always been an area where slicing was really celebrated and explored like it is now. It's different now. There's a lot more subjects being explored. So I think it's important that if you don't know, if you're not sure, then reach out. They can reach out to someone like you. They can reach out to me. They can reach out in Pandemic Puppy.
Yeah.
And just say, golly, I feel like there's something I should be doing, but I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah. And
I think we should always be teaching our pet dog owners to be mindful of how can I break this down and make it flow easier.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. That concept of splitting is hard for a lot of people. Oftentimes when I'm working with clients and give that next step, like here's the next little sliver we're going to add. They're like, we're only doing that. Because for us, it can be really hard because we see that big picture and we want to jump there, right? And all of these little changes that the puppies experience or the dogs experience sometimes don't even occur to us. So it's not that we're, like you said, trying to be malicious or have ill intent and jump to that next step. We just don't even realize all those little pieces that matter to the dog, that matter to the learner here. Right. And it's so important that if we don't know what that next step is, or if we're starting to see unwanted behavior, the puppies were doing really well and now all of a sudden they're not. It's always a good idea to reach out to, like you said, a qualified professional to help you analyze that and help you break that process down into smaller pieces, focusing on success, where all of the puppies involved can find success, can find comfort, can find confidence.
I think you make a really good point too, which I think is one way that we can discourage novice trainers is these tiny steps. They don't see the progression because they've not experienced it before, and it can be discouraging to them. But I think that the thing that's important there is the little bitty steps are perceived by the dog. And it's very similar to how we teach kids to hit a baseball. We put the ball on a pole when they're tiny. And they just flail away at it. and we call that good. We love it. They love it. It's fun. If we took those toddlers out and we threw a fastball at them, they would not be able to hit it. They would probably be terrified. And they would decide that they're not good at baseball. Or maybe even worse, they would decide they're just not good at things. And then we apply a label to them. Well, Johnny's just not athletic. And we do that with ourselves. We can visualize breaking things down into small steps to learn them ourselves. All we need to do is teach, I think, our companion dog owners and our puppy raisers that everything should look like a series of small steps and that training should be uneventful in that way. If training is eventful, if it looks like a reality TV show and it's dramatic and it's probably not sound. It should be smooth and eventful, sort of like when you start playing a new game on your phone. They walk you through every little step, right? That you can be successful so that you don't stop playing their game. It's the same thing we do with puppies.
Let's talk about that for just a minute, because I think that's a really nice transition into what it looks like when we start working with the puppies, particularly outside of the house. When in multi-dog households in general, we go somewhere and we generally think, well, I can't leave somebody behind. I've got to bring everybody. It's a group activity. It's the family. But when we're raising littermates, it's super important that the puppies are getting those individual experiences to not only bond with us as humans and as their trainer, but also to learn how to function as the dog independently. And a lot of the times when we start doing that, those socialization events, those observe and learns, those outings can look dramatic. It can look like a big event for the dog. So how do you, when you're working with the puppies, and starting to do these individual sessions with them outside in the real world, really focus on that concept of splitting and breaking it down into little pieces?
I think ideally in my dream world, this would be work that would be starting with the breeder. Because we can normalize being separated from other dogs and having fantastically fun interactions with your caregivers really easily with little puppies. We start this as soon as they can eat solid food. We'll take one out and we'll just feed it. And we'll put it back, or and then we take it out and we power up a clicker and we take it out and so I know we have a lot of breeders in our group, and I know we have a lot of puppy owners in our group. And this is something, if you're looking for a puppy, it's a surprisingly simple thing to ask. Are you working with your puppies individually? And what does that look like for you? And then let the breeder tell you what they're doing. I think breeders are generally willing to do that. And so we need to normalize it. Normalize the idea that you are removed from the other dogs. This applies to any multi-dog environment.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have tremendously fun and enjoyable interactions with your caregiver of all types. Grooming, nail trimming, cleaning ears, all of these sort of things that we generally like to do with multiple dogs separated from each other,
Mm-hmm.
especially in breeds like terriers, corgis, that if you quick a nail and one dog goes, ah, that you don't then have every dog jumping on that dog just from instinct.
Right.
Right. So if we're going to slice this down and we think about this, when I want to take the puppy on an outing by itself to the store, which is super important,
Mm-hmm.
then, or even on an observe, but the eventual goal, let's go with the eventual goal. I want to be able to take my dog to the vet,
Mm-hmm.
for a walk, to the park, camping, wherever I go. And I want to be able to do that with both of my dogs together and not have it be mayhem, and one of my dogs individually. Because again, we can't promise our dogs that they'll always be together.
Right.
So I'm gonna really slice that down to the very first week that I bring those puppies home. And I'm gonna be observing them to see if they're eating.
Mm-hmm.
Puppies often don't eat well during transition week. This is nothing to be concerned about. It's normal. We certainly don't want to make mistakes during that week that actually teach the puppy that if they refuse food, we'll give them better food. We don't want to go down
Yeah.
that bunny trail that we have to solve. But it's normal for puppies to miss a meal and not eat great at first. Once they're eating well, that's step one.
Mm-hmm.
These puppies, especially if you get a puppy and it's never been fed individually when it was with its breeder or foster home, it was fed from a big puppy pan.
Right.
Those puppies have a very pronounced transition to eating independently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a must have. You cannot feed puppies together.
Mm-mm.
Once they hit adolescence, some things are going to start happening that are not going to be good.
Right.
So, especially in some breeds, like that's just never going to be in the cards to feed them from the same bowl as adults.
Yeah.
So, this is the first slice. Can this puppy eat out of a bowl by itself with
Mm-hmm.
the other puppy next to it? Then can I separate the bowls? Can I put the bowls in separate crates? Can the puppies not see each other while they eat? Will the puppies now eat food from my hand? Will they do that together? Will they do that separated by 6 inches? Will they take food from my hand when they can't see each other? And then we're going to build outwards. Can I take one puppy with me into the front yard and leave the other puppy having its breakfast? And will it eat its breakfast from the bowl in the front yard or even from my hand? I'm not
Mm-hmm.
a hand feeding person. I don't think it helps with resource guarding. I don't think it helps with bonding. I don't know what the deal is with it, but I might take a puppy and its breakfast to the front yard and just see if the puppy will eat food from a spoon
Yeah.
or eat if it's a discrete piece,
Mm-hmm.
just eat it from my hand, or will it do a kibble scatter, or will it chase it, right? Once it'll do that, I'm going to switch and do all that work with the other puppy the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to see, will the puppy go with me to the car and just sit in the car with me and eat food, just like
Yeah.
it did on the front porch. And then I'm going to do that. So every little skill I've built out, like I think a really good analogy that I try to remember myself is it's like a pizza dough. Did you ever make a pizza dough like from scratch and you
Uh-huh.
stretch it out and it's just
Yeah.
because it's not, the dough's not ready.
Yeah.
It needs more time for the gluten to become strengthened. It needs more kneading to stress it,
Mm-hmm.
gentle stretching. If you try to just pull it to the size of your pizza pan, it just shreds.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll push the dough out and then it contracts. You push it out and you're like, yay, and then it's this big again. It's a lot the same, I think, with these sibling skills.
Yeah.
You're going to just push it out a little, and then maybe the next day they eat next to each other again. And then you're going
Mm-hmm.
to be asking these questions of the puppy. Can you eat when you can't see your sibling? Can you eat out of the house? Can you
Mm-hmm.
eat in the car? If I put you in the car and we do an observe and learn, could you eat in the crate without your sibling? And
Mm-hmm.
all those little skills are actually started in the home. If they can't do them in the home, they can't do them outside either.
Right.
Um, and it's about introducing this concept that every location the puppy is with you, there's the potential that the training and reinforcement game is going to start.
Mm-hmm.
And that the puppy can start that by being attentive.
Yeah.
And then the fun things start to happen. So then we get into a rhythm. This is the nice thing about siblings is you do something with one puppy one day, the next day you flip it and do the other puppy, the next day you flip it and do the other puppy. And when they get to where they have all these little skills, then you can bring them back together.
Mm-hmm.
Can you both, eat from my hand? Can I give you a treat and then give you a treat? Can I give you a treat and give you a treat? And they're not lunging and it's not diving puppies. And
Yeah.
can you do that out front? And by then we've taught them some behaviors. I do attention first, voluntary
Mm-hmm.
attention. That's sort of my start button for everything. If my dog can't give me attention, I know they're not ready.
Right.
And with puppies, I think this is ridiculously important because we need to allow puppies to observe their environment freely until they're
Mm-hmm.
satiated. So when we cue them to do something, I think we oftentimes interrupt extremely necessary observational learning.
Right.
So, yes, I don't want my puppies ignoring me. Definitely don't want that scenario where you walk out the front door and now you're dead to the puppy.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't want to be cueing attention when my puppy is trying to observe something in the environment in an obvious data collection way.
Right.
We use eye contact for that. When the puppy offers me eye contact, then everything starts.
Yep.
So we'll take the puppies. It's very much like the transition week.
Mm-hmm.
We might take the puppies together the first time, and then the next day we're going to take another puppy to the same location, one
Mm-hmm.
puppy, puppy A. Then the third day we would take puppy B.
Yep.
And so, or I might flip it. I might take puppy A the first time, take puppy B the second time, and then take them together the third time. It depends a little bit on if I have an optimistic set of puppies or an
Mm-hmm.
optimistic set of puppies. Do they need the support of another dog? If,
Right.
if they do, I would personally always choose to take a nanny
Mm-hmm.
that's good in that environment, right? I have
Yep.
a couple nannies that are just great at Tractor Supply. They're calm, they're attentive without working,
Mm-hmm.
right? They investigate things in a calm and methodical manner. They're the perfect dog for a puppy to emulate and
Yeah.
to observe. So if I had a puppy that was telling me that they worry about things, I would take them with a nanny if I had access to one. If
Mm-hmm.
I don't, I would take them together and I would do the first few times just an observe and learn.
Yep.
And then I would start to take one and then the other. And then do I have two? With siblings, we often have two puppies that are quite similar if the breeder's done their work, because the goal of breeding is homogeny. No
Mm-hmm.
one goes to a breeder so that they can get a dog with completely unpredictable traits.
Right.
And breeders certainly shouldn't be striving to produce wildly diverse traits within one litter. So ideally, if you have siblings, you probably have puppies pretty close to each other on the big bell curve of dog traits.
Right.
If you have rescue puppies, this can go out the window because we can have multiple sires.
Mm-hmm.
And that can dramatically affect. And when we have mixed breeds puppies, even more so than multiple sire puppies, because we know when we start mixing breeds, each individual conception gets different genes.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have a mixed breed puppy that's 75%, I don't know, Labrador and 25% Staffordshire Terrier, both parents having a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have full siblings that have a lot of Staffordshire Terrier or a lot of Labrador. It's just how
Yeah.
inherited. So but the odds are if I have two optimists, I'll have two optimists. If I have two pessimists, I'll have two pessimists. And so we'll work with a rhythm that
Mm-hmm.
helps the puppies be successful. That always involves some degree of going independently and some degree of going together, because we do want them to not be out of control when they're together.
Right.
It's not just a giant party when they're together.
Yeah.
So I think it is super important that we're thinking about the total picture. Yes, I want them to be autonomous individuals,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, I also want to be able to take them together and have them both be responsive to me. So we need to normalize all of those scenarios. And that's where the scheduling comes in.
Yeah.
Scheduling is always important. I'm a big believer in schedules. I know some people think that schedules make dogs maladaptive to change. I've just never found that to be the case. I think schedules and predictability are super important for dogs, just like they are for people, and especially
Mm-hmm.
children and puppies. So I think that we need to be extra attentive to schedules with sibling puppies.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, at the end of the day, in order for the puppies to be successful, the human has to be successful. So a lot of times having that schedule helps set the human up for success to make sure that they're scheduling the appropriate amounts of time to get all of those little pieces taken care of, because it's really easy for us to get tied up with normal life and then go, holy crap, like 3 weeks have passed. What have I done with the puppies? And those early stages are so essential for the puppy's development while they are still in that critical period to get those experiences. So
Yeah.
having that schedule for the human, to keep them on track with all of the learning goals as well.
I think it's huge because we go back to this again and again. If you're raising a puppy for the second or third or fourth time in your life,
Mm-hmm.
that's not enough practice to have memorized everything that you kind of need to do.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of people that raise puppies all the time.
Yeah.
There are some people like us and breeders and sport dog trainers that do grow a lot of dogs out. And so
Mm-hmm.
we are raising puppies often and frequently. And
Yep.
of course it's the same with breeding. It's the same with anything. If you do things a lot,
Mm-hmm.
then they become habit.
Yep.
But our pet dog owners don't have that. And what the schedule does is, and I'll add, what having a really good professional or book like
Mm-hmm.
Natalie's Level Up Your Dog Training or
Yeah.
even guides in the group, it's really helpful to have like do this, do this, do this in a logical sequence
Mm-hmm.
that is sound, so that you're worrying about things that you need to worry about at the right time.
Right.
You're not fussing about things that you don't need to fuss about yet.
Yeah.
Not something we need to be fussing about at this moment. Let's not
Yeah.
borrow stress and anxiety. Let's just deal with today. And it also keeps everybody in the household on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
And we know from the group how much stress puppy raising places on people. And we know that stress transmits out into family units.
Yeah.
And puppy raising, we want to make it as fun as possible and as memorable as possible, because again, most people don't have many opportunities. This is a special event in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try to make it as memorable and fun and enjoyable as possible. And let's do some things that negate the inevitable work and stress that comes along with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where schedules and professional guidance and, picking one good book, don't feel like you need 20 books.
Mm-hmm.
Pick a trusted source of information, because that goes to doing things efficiently.
Yeah.
And not borrowing trouble. Well, so-and-so says this is going to be a trouble, and now I'm
Mm-hmm.
upset about it because I don't want my dog to have X.
Yeah.
Let's deal with today. And
in terms of, talking about stress and talking about wanting to make this memorable, what do you feel like when you are raising litter mates or when your clients are raising litter mates, what do you find is the most challenging thing for them?
definitely the most challenging thing, I think, is just the getting into the routine of separation.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest challenge. I think there's an expectation when people get siblings that they'll be together.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be so fun. They'll help each other, they'll raise each other, they'll play with each other, they'll tire each other out. And then I come in and say, their time together is going to be less than their time separated.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to put one puppy in its playpen, and that requires conditioning it to confinement and to
Right.
confine, which requires thinking and planning and doing. And then you have to babysit the one that's out.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires thinking and planning and doing. And then they're going to have nap time, and we're going to switch it all.
Yep.
And you've got to do the same work again in the flip side with the other puppy. And then you're going to start yet again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest adjustment is, and the hardest thing is, expectations. I think oftentimes there's two demographics that tend to have siblings. One are capital D dog people,
Mm-hmm.
right? That are growing out too. And there's the old saying, there needs to be an heir and a spare in England, right? A prince and then a backup in case the prince would die in old
Mm-hmm.
times. And sport and show people are this way too, right? We need an heir and a spare in case one of them doesn't work out.
Right.
So the other demographic is at the other end of that spectrum.
Yeah, the far end.
Some of our most naive.
Yeah.
And often the most kind-hearted.
Yeah.
Of our dog owners that are like, I just couldn't bear the thought of the puppy being separated, and it made me so sad. And then being alone when I would go to work. So I got him a friend. And it's so kind-hearted and it's so sweet and it's perfectly valid. I think dogs in most breeds, there are breeds that are not dog social. We know that, right? You can have a chow chow, and that dog could probably go its whole life and never really necessarily miss not having 5 other chow chows in the living room with them.
Right.
And on the other end of that spectrum, you have some of these hound breeds that are kind of designed to live in a pack.
Mm-hmm.
They love other dogs. So there's continuums with everything. Nothing is ever black and white. But I generally think dogs enjoy having other dogs around.
Mm-hmm.
They're an incredibly social species that we have made more social to tolerate our needs for them.
Right.
And then we put them into a home with no other dogs. So I get that demographic that's like, oh, I don't want them to be lonely. I get that. So they bring the dog in, and then I come in with my, and I'm like, here's all the separations we have to do with them.
Yeah.
And because they haven't seen the 6-month-old, 8 months old fighting,
mm-hmm.
it can seem mean.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That's just hard. It's very, very difficult to be so soft-hearted, because sometimes things that we need to do to give these dogs autonomy just break their owners' hearts.
Yeah.
Just break them. They're just like, oh, right. No, I can't go to the store and leave one behind. I'm like, you got to.
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't want the one left behind to be distressed.
Right.
And that requires work.
Well, and I think that's where it comes down to having a good certified trainer to help with the process, because good ones will be able to explain the importance of it. And I do feel like no matter how, new a dog owner might be that is in this experience, if they truly understand the goal that they're working towards and why it's important, then they make the changes. because
I
they do
agree.
want what's best for those puppies and those dogs. That's,
Yes.
why they ended up with two
That's why they
oftentimes.
got them. Yeah, they want them to be together. They want to have two, and they I think they just need to understand. First of all, we need to stop scaring the crap out of them.
Mm-hmm.
When people are really scared, they often don't do anything.
Yeah, shut down.
They're paralyzed now by all of these doom and gloom things. And the puppies are in the home, presumably. So we need to not lead with terrifying them. We just need to give them the information. If we had twin humans,
Mm-hmm.
we would also be teaching them to be autonomous from each other.
Yeah.
So it's not a foreign concept. I think that they just need it explained to them in a way that doesn't frighten them,
Mm-hmm.
and also reflects that this is important.
Yeah.
And in some breeds it's less important because the breeds are inherently very benign and phlegmatic, and in other breeds, by golly, you have to be on your A game. You want to have two male Dobermans in your home.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to have two intact male working line German Shepherds in some bloodlines,
Mm-hmm.
holy pajoli,
Yeah.
you are going to have a lot of work to do. And ideally, in an ideal world, breeders who know that their dogs are not dog social,
Mm-hmm.
either by gender, by breed, or whatnot, will just simply not
Yeah.
place siblings together.
Right.
But in some breeds, the dogs really are just very easy and
Yeah.
very social, and you can expect not to have a lot of problems.
Yep.
But in other breeds, not that way.
Yeah. Is there something that now after raising so many yourself, that you wish you would have known when you first started?
Well, I definitely wish that we had had better and more modern training methods
Mm-hmm.
back then, because I think when you have multiple dogs, um, period,
Yeah.
it is there's less stress and more stress,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're dealing with personalities, multiple personalities. So I
Yep.
wish that we had sort of more knowledge about just the value of management,
Mm-hmm.
and the value of setting dogs up to learn what we want them to learn instead of reacting to things they've learned that we don't like.
Right.
And that
That
was how,
proactive versus
yeah,
reactive type of planning.
yeah, that was not discussed a lot when I was a young woman and was starting out in breeding. We just
Mm-hmm.
would correct problems when they came up, but there really wasn't a lot of thought and discussion, and yet alone like incremental programs and coaching to
Mm-hmm.
help you think about, I really need these dogs to be able to take treats without jostling each other.
Right.
Right? I need that skill just to live with them, because when they get old, they're going to need medicines. At some point, they're going to need medicines, and I need that, and
Mm-hmm.
I need to be able to ask them to get off of things and get on things, and I need to be able to. So I wish that we'd had more of that. That was whenever I look back, I think the biggest wishes that I have for my past self was that we just had more information available like what we have now.
Yeah.
And then the second thing that I'd wish we had had then was more nuanced discussions about breed traits,
Mm-hmm.
because in those days, breed traits were real blanket statements and labels. And I find them to be, they often just don't fit.
Yep.
It's like women's jeans. A size 6 in one brand might fit perfectly, and a size 6 in another brand is doesn't fit at all.
Yeah.
You can't count on sizes across brands. It's just the same with labels. So I wish
Yeah.
we'd had that, because there was a lot of stuff in those days that was just blanket.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if I can get my siblings to get along, you can too. I don't know why your Dobermans are fighting.
Yeah.
My Boston Terriers are fine. And there wasn't a lot of real nuance when you went to get a dog. Everyone talked about breed traits, but it was like some sort of magical Fantasyland discussion
Yeah.
that was never translated into what it really means. What do we really mean when we say aloof?
Yeah.
That's something that's in a lot of breed standards, and I think it has almost no real meaning to people. They don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I
and
think
you're gonna get-
in addition to that too, when you start talking about those little changes, I mean, that goes to individualizing your training plans as well and individualizing your management. And I think that's one of my favorite things about training, but it's also one of the hardest things about training is that, you know, we have these general concepts of learning theory and how to set dogs up for success, but the breed plays a part, the home plays a part, the owner plays a part, the individual dog's personality and temperament plays a part. There are so many little pieces where we as experienced trainers and dog owners have to be able to look at that big picture and then customize everything based on what is needed for the dog right in front of us.
Yeah, I think these are new discussions that we didn't used to have. It used to be that we trained dogs and good dogs did good with that.
Mm-hmm.
And bad dogs did bad.
Yep.
And if you hit a dog that didn't respond well, was because the dog didn't have enough drive, or the dog was stubborn, or the dog was dominant.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, those sorts of basically maladaptive philosophies and labels they disenfranchised huge numbers of dogs and owners. Now what we have is we have core principles, and we can very easily and on the fly with experience
Mm-hmm.
work with what the individual brings us.
Yeah.
There's a saying that I both love and hate, which is train the dog in front of you, which I both love and hate that,
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons. But I think it does represent something that is relatively new from my time in dogs, which is this idea that we change to fit the dog.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's not about whether the dog is good or bad. It's more about whether or not the person that is teaching that dog has a big or small toolbox.
Yeah.
Whether they themselves are adaptive or not adaptive. And those skills are all learnable. They're not, I think in the past, we felt like people were either talented or they weren't. So if you weren't good at something, well, it kind of sucks to be you. I'm great at it. And now I think there's much more work being put into this idea that you can always do better. We can teach you better. You can then teach your dog better.
Yeah.
Everything is more adaptive. Everything is more tailored. Everything is more positive. And because of that, we can start much earlier with puppies without doing damage. I mean, we always could start early with puppies, but wise trainers knew that punishment damages puppies.
Yeah.
Fundamentally damages them and changes their brains. And so they avoided doing that. And we just let them be wild till they were 6 to 12 months old.
Oh my goodness.
And thank God we did, because personally, I think that punishing puppies is incredibly damaging.
Yeah.
And that's what we had then. We had, yank and thank, or, reward and punishment. And so now we can start puppies very young. We can master what's reinforcing to them based on their age and their breed and the situation that they're in. We can leverage that into controlling what they learn so that everything flows. Everything just flows very naturally. And when we can get these models in place, everybody benefits.
Yep. Owners and the puppies.
The owners and the puppies. It becomes more pleasant and memorable. People feel like their puppies are very bright and very smart. And
because they are.
They are. And
Yeah.
It was never that there was a problem with the puppies or the dogs.
Yeah.
We're the ones that trap them in our homes, and then we grouse about the fact that that we're not very good teachers, which we then put onto them.
Right.
And so I think we really have done so much with understanding this idea that learning is ubiquitous. It's just happening all the time. And that you cannot tease out what your puppy is learning and practicing every day from the behaviors that he does in other contexts.
Right.
And the same
Right.
goes for siblings. If your siblings are practicing always being together and using aggression to resolve disputes between them, or using aggression just to offload emotion, then they're going to carry that into other contexts. And they're going to perfect it with sexual maturity.
Right.
Into the adult version of those behaviors, which is much, much more serious than your puppies having a scuffle because they're tired.
Right.
But what they learn then moves forward.
Right.
So we really don't we don't want any dogs in a multi-dog environment sort of learning that the first way they resolve conflicts is with aggression. It's fine if a dog wants to snark and say, "Hey, don't take my bone." That's acceptable. That's acceptable to me. My nannies will do that to a puppy. The puppy will be like, "Are you sure?" If I really wag and lick your lips with that bone. And, you'll just see this very gradual progression of signals. And puppies respond. Some puppies respond to the first signal. They're like, "Oh, okay, you're serious about it." And others, will get a snarl and a snark, and then they'll be like, "Ah!" and that's okay. Like dogs, I think sometimes we overreact as dog owners to normal irritated communication. We might yell at each other, but we could never handle that our dog might use a non-violent, aggressive type display to actually say, "Hey, stop humping me, 6-month-old." Male
That's
dog.
annoying. Please stop.
That's annoying. Please stop. Which is fundamentally different from a dog having explosive rage towards a 6-month-old puppy because they've been punished for any sort of negative interaction with that puppy when it was little and adorable. And now
now we have too many negative associations built up, and we've been told not to make those little communication signals. So now we have to kind of take it to the next level.
No one is protecting me. No one is putting that puppy in an X pen so that I can rest my 8-year-old back. From being slammed. I that's a whole other subject.
It is.
The respect and the care that's needed for adult dogs when a puppy comes in the home.
Well, the amount of responsibility that really needs to lie on the human who chose to get the dog versus other dogs that were living in the household.
Right. Yeah. It's a whole other subject, and somewhat related to siblings because it is very much the same. We have to curate what they're learning, and we do sometimes have to protect the puppies from each other. There are periods for my German Shepherd puppies, predictably, at around 12 to 16 weeks, there may be days where they're not together at all because they just come out and it's an immediate over the top play fest where one puppy ends up getting really mad and now we have a bicker. Because again, their developmental problem is aligned where they just are both at the same phase at the same time. And for my breed, sometimes inappropriate play is a normal part of growing up. There's a lot of predatory play and can I get you to move kind of play, and normal for the breed and doesn't predict anything bad. But we need to not let it run amok. Like a campfire versus a forest fire. The campfire is nice, but if you let it run amok, it's not so good.
And that takes time. It takes time for owners to be able to learn those skills. And again, if anybody is raising littermates right now and listening along, don't be afraid to reach out to help. We've got the pandemic puppy raising support group where we can help you out, and we can help you get connected with a qualified professional because in all honesty, I think a lot of people wait a little too long to get that help. And if you are confused or stressed or feeling overwhelmed, the time to reach out is now because you don't want to let things go on any further. It's not going to be good for you or the puppies.
That's true.
And
because
Susanne,
there does come a point where it stops to be a sibling puppy raising issue and
right,
starts to be an interhome aggression issue
right.
or an interhome anxiety issue. And then you don't need a trainer at all. You
Yeah.
need a behavior counselor or a veterinary behaviorist. And
Yep.
I think there are some red flags. If you cannot separate your puppies
Mm-hmm.
without your puppies panicking, legitimately panicking, that's a red flag that you need professional help now.
Yeah.
If you're having squabbles that or fights
Mm-hmm.
where you're having an ear that comes up bloody,
Mm-hmm.
or puppies are knocking each other's teeth out, their baby teeth.
Mm-hmm.
If you're seeing a lot of guarding
Mm-hmm.
of items, if the puppies are non-responsive to their owner, those are red flags.
Yeah.
Those warrant help now. Unfortunately, I get people that contact me when their dogs are 8, 9, 10, 12 months old. And at that point, I have to refer them to someone like Camille.
Yeah.
It's no longer in my purview as a trainer.
Right.
Now we're having very serious problems, and you need a whole other level of
Yep.
help.
Yeah.
So yes, ideally, I think people should consult with a professional before they bring sibling puppies home.
Mm-hmm.
They just should. They should have, they need to make sure that they're not doing that in a breed where we can say with a pretty good degree of accuracy that when these dogs hit sexual maturity, you're going to be living on a crate and rotate schedule for the next 10 years.
Right.
Well,
Well, and even understanding what it entails,
yeah,
because you might not realize quite how much work it is. And when you talk to someone about what it's going to involve, you might go, oh, maybe this actually isn't something I'm ready for or want to do. And having that knowledge ahead of time is huge. Or if you figure out how much work it is and go, yeah, no, I still want to do it. Getting yourself mentally prepared, your schedule prepared, so that you know what you're doing before the puppies even come into the picture, which is going to set everyone up for their best chance of success.
Exactly. I think expectations are a big deal.
Yeah.
Have realistic expectations going into it, and you'll have a much happier process than if you had unrealistic expectations and now you've been brought to reality and you have regrets.
Right.
This is not what I was envisioning this would be. This isn't necessarily fun for me. I didn't intend for dogs to be my new hobby.
Yep.
And what I wanted was just some cute little things to run around and be each other's best friend. It's just, I think thinking about it and having expectations that are realistic. And then once you're in the system and you're in the programs and you're doing the work, don't let people scare you into being paralyzed.
Yeah.
Work with the dogs. The odds are it'll be okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I feel like I could talk to you about this all day. You're such a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon and chatting with us. I think it's a topic that we need more good info out there on. So, and I know that you've got some information on your site. I've included a link to a blog, which is awesome tips on raising littermates. Yeah. And you also have a course. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your sibling school?
Yes, I did the blog first because I was so discouraged by some of the, frankly, bullying that I would see people being subjected to when they would even just innocuously post pictures of sibling puppies.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is really mean. And I don't like that. Like it left a bad taste in my mouth. So I actually reached out to some friends and we just put together a list of tips and they're all very common sense type tips. And then I got irritated again during the pandemic because everything is magnified during the pandemic.
Yep.
And we are all on social media more.
And we are all more stressed out.
Yes. And the group took off and grew so fast, which it just started out being kind of for us.
Yeah.
To raise our puppies. And then, there's like this avalanche of people coming in. And I started to again see people that were having multiple puppies that were being, you know, really bullied. They were trying to do things and they were making mistakes. So I thought, you know, I'm just going to put this into a course because I don't have the time to help all these people. I don't
Right.
have that. Nobody has that kind of time. And
Yeah.
apparently there are a lot of trainers that literally freak out when
Mhm.
people contact them and say they have siblings. This is something, I don't know how many people now have messaged me and thanked me for offering the course or even just offering the blog
Yeah.
because they literally can't get trainers to help them.
Yeah. That's wild to
And
me.
it's crazy. I don't understand dog trainers. I don't understand dog trainers sometimes. So the course is basically a real step by step. This is a step by step from the day you bring your puppies home until they reach adolescence. And then it has the routine of it and the principles of it are ongoing. You'll use them to some degree throughout your dog's life.
Hmm.
And we talk about in detail about every little solitary thing, from how do we get the puppies sleeping through the night in separate crates? How do we get them sleeping through the nights in separate rooms, maybe, if that's
Hmm.
what you wanted to do? And how do we get to where we can take one dog out for exercise and leave another at home, and the one at home is actually delighted to be staying at home today because that's
Yeah.
fun and that's special? How do we handle veterinary visits with both of them, with one of them? How do we take them out together? How do we take them out singly? But the main core that runs through it is building a sense of confident autonomy.
Hmm.
And this is important for anybody with multiple dogs, but it's super important for siblings. So how do we get
Yeah.
them where they're responsive to you and they're bonded with you and you can manage them even if they're large like my German shepherds, and they're comfortable together when they reach sexual maturity and adulthood? They have the skills to be together as adults and they don't have 2 years worth of bad blood between them.
Right.
So it's a very incremental approach, as really all the courses that I do are.
Yeah.
And it starts from the day you bring your puppy home or the day you start the course with sort of a rhythm of evaluating where we are,
Hmm.
adapting to that, moving on to the next step, evaluating where we are, adapting to that, moving on to the next step. And
That's great.
ideally, I think if I do my job well as an instructor, people will learn how to apply that sort of method to living with their dogs in general.
Yeah. Which is
You know,
huge. I mean, we already talked about how important that splitting process is and how hard it is for a lot of even professional trainers.
oh my gosh,
That
it's so
concept
hard.
of splitting
Yeah,
is so hard and finding the right steps. So I'm really
yeah,
glad that as a, professional trainer and somebody who's experienced with raising littermates, I think it's going to be a wonderful resource. So for everybody watching, I have included a link directly to the course in the description. So if you have any questions about it, definitely reach out to Susanne at Clickety Split, and she'll be able to get those questions answered. But it's a one of a kind thing. It doesn't really exist anywhere else, and it needs to. It needs to.
yeah.
There's a
We
need
want
for it.
these. We really, really want what everybody wants, which is for these puppies, once they're settled in a home, to have the greatest chance possible of staying in that home
Yeah.
happily.
Yep.
And to do that, we just needed to give people some tools.
Yep.
Yeah,
Awesome. I love it.
excellent.
Thank you so much, Susanne, again for spending your time with us this afternoon. I hope that it will help a bunch of people. I think it will. It's a lot of really great information about raising littermates and hopefully giving them a little hope that it can be done,
Yep.
and giving them some ideas on how to do it. So,
Right. Thank you for having me. As always, I enjoyed talking to you.
yeah, thanks, Susanne.
Thank you.